Welcome to Canada's most irreverent talk show. This is the Andrew Lawton Show, brought to you by True North.
Hello and welcome to you all, Canada's most irreverent talk show here. This is the Andrew Lawton Show on Wednesday, May 1st, 2024. It is hump day. Hopefully you're having a great week, or if not, you can at least take comfort and solace in the fact that there is less of the week ahead of you than behind you. Although I guess that only works if you're on Eastern or Central time. If you're on Pacific time, you're not quite at the midway point of the Wednesday, but you'll get there. You will get through the week. I believe in you. Meanwhile, if you don't work Monday to Friday, you're like, what the heck is this guy going on about? So we'll move on from our weekly positional observations here and talk about the fireworks in the House of Commons yesterday. Now, this is not normally a place that is exciting or riveting to watch. It's not typically primetime entertainment, but as far as daytime entertainment goes, the House of Commons can sometimes have you covered. This was in question period yesterday. Now, I've got to say, I think Speaker of the House Greg Fergus just woke up on the bad side of the bed. He was on an absolute tear. There was a tense exchange between Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre and Justin Trudeau. Poilievre was talking about the Liberal government's permissive drug policies. Justin Trudeau is accusing the Conservatives of being extremists. It's kind of just that old kabuki theater thing time and time again. But then what happened was Rachel Thomas, who I ran into Rachel Thomas at the airport on Sunday when I was on my way back home. That has nothing to do with the story. It was just coincidental that she's now a feature in a story we are covering, and I had the chance to chat with her very briefly the other day. And Rachel Thomas had said something about how the Speaker of the House was behaving in a disgraceful manner for his conduct and commentary and the way he was presiding over the House. And well, the Speaker didn't take too kindly to that.
I'm going to ask the honourable member from Lethbridge, if she has problems with the chair, that she should challenge the chair in a way. But as she knows, as the honourable member from Lethbridge knows, that by challenging the chair is against the rules of this House. I'll ask the honourable member to please to ask her to withdraw her remarks.
The chair is acting in a disgraceful manner.
I'm going to ask you, will you... I have to name you for disregarding the authority of the chair. Pursuant to authority granted to me by Standing Order 11, I order you to withdraw from the House and from any participation by video conference for the remainder of this day's sitting.
Yes, as you heard there, she dared to call the Speaker a disgrace, so he names her, which is it sounds like a less of a deal than it is. It is actually a big deal when the Speaker of the House names someone, and then he expels her from the chamber. One Conservative down, 100 and some odd to go. And then just a couple of moments later, as the exchange between Poilievre and Trudeau continues, Pierre Poilievre finds that he, too, attracts the Speaker of the House's ire.
Mr. Speaker, it is a choice for him to implement extremist policies that have taken the lives of 2,500 British Columbians every single year. Since the NDP has asked him to reverse course on his and formerly their radical policy, 22 British Columbians have died of drug overdoses. But he continues to allow those drugs to kill the people in our hospitals and on our public transit. When will we put an end to this wacko policy by this wacko Prime Minister?
No. That is not there are a couple of things which are going on here today, which is not acceptable. And I ask all members, please, to keep themselves, to control themselves. I'm going to ask two things. One, I'm going to ask the Honourable Leader of the Opposition to withdraw that term, which is not considered parliamentary.
Mr. Speaker, I replace wacko with extremist. He is an
The honourable member to please. I'm going to ask the Leader of the Opposition once again to just withdraw that comment, please. And I'll invite the honourable member. I'm going to ask the Honourable Leader of the Opposition to please withdraw that comment and simply withdraw that comment.
I'll replace it with radical leftist policy.
I am not asking to replace. I'm asking the honourable member to just simply withdraw.
Mr. Speaker, I replace the word wacko with extremist.
I'm going to ask the Honourable Leader of the Opposition one last time to please withdraw that comment and simply withdraw that comment.
I simply withdraw and replace with the aforementioned adjective.
Mr. Poilievre, I have to name you for disregarding the authority of the chair. Pursuant to the authority granted to me by Standing Order 11, I order you to withdraw from the House and from any participation by video conference for the remainder of this day's sitting.
He dared call Justin Trudeau a wacko, and apparently that was sufficiently unparliamentary that Greg Fergus wants to show him the door, kick him out of the House of Commons until the end of the session. It was absolutely absurd. Now, I did a little bit of research, and I found that the term wacko is not at all foreign to the House of Commons. Put that up, Sean. This is on openparliament.ca, which lets you basically go through I think the entirety of the Hansard, certainly the last several decades. 21 references to the word wacko. Now, some of those are not directed at a person. Here we have being used ironically. We have Peter Julian calling wacko claims by conservatives. Peter Julian loves the word wacko, actually. He used it June 10th and twice on June 13th. You have Jennifer O'Connell, the liberal, who I also saw at the airport on Sunday, by the way, accused the conservatives of using wacko science data. You have another MP there talking about the three of you doing something wacko. So the term wacko has been used without controversy many times, at least 21 times in the House of Commons and committee meetings. But when Justin Trudeau is the subject of the term, when Pierre Poilievre calls the Prime Minister a wacko, that is when the Speaker of the House intervenes. Now, some people may think this stuff really doesn't matter, that this is all just theatrical, and to some extent it is. We know the Conservatives were putting their fundraising together pretty much immediately after this happened because they know that they're able to show that the institutions are stacked against them, that the Liberals are more concerned with policing Conservatives' tone than engaging in good government and good policy making. Certainly, Justin Trudeau looks like the beneficiary of a speaker who is, well, elected a Liberal, supposed to be a nonpartisan, impartial chair when he is sitting in that throne and he's presiding over what's happening in the House of Commons. But instead, he's just like flicking away conservative MPs. This is not a flick, but you know what I mean. Flicking away conservative MPs. Oh, Rachel Harder, you're done. Oh, Pierre Poilievre, you're done. Anyone else want a piece of me? Come on, come on, come on. And then, of course, the Conservatives do what you saw at the end of that second clip there. Conservatives just say, what's the point in sticking around? They get up and leave the chamber in protest. It's an absurd development. And while you may say it doesn't matter, it does in the sense of that indignation that the Liberals have. In question period, Justin Trudeau had been spending his time defending against all of these very legitimate questions about his government's record. And what does he do? He just keeps talking about, oh, Diagolon, oh, Pierre Poilievre is far right, oh, extremist, oh, conspiracy theory. And he makes all of these terms. He throws out all of these labels, all of these insults. And then Pierre Poilievre says wacko. And it's as though he has just said the unforgivable thing. He said the name Voldemort. He said he who must not be named name. That's basically what he's done. And it's supposedly this massive affront to democracy, more so than perhaps kicking out the leader of the opposition because you don't like the questions he's asking of the Prime Minister. This is why Canadians are fed up with the Liberals. Canadians don't want the tone policing, the wokeness, the political correctness. Yes, there are language rules in the House of Commons, but my goodness, this is absolutely absurd. Poilievre, who, again, knew what he was saying when he said it, he even offered to revise it. He said, okay, I'll take that word away and I'll replace it with extremist. I don't think extremist is unparliamentary. He also offered to replace it to radical. And the House of Commons Speaker, Greg Fergus, said, no, you have to withdraw it all. Withdraw everything. You can't just replace the word. Well, Which is it? Is the word the problem? Or do you just not like the fact that he's criticizing Justin Trudeau? Sounds increasingly like the latter to me. Justin Trudeau has been an incredibly divisive prime minister. This has been a feature and not a bug of his premiership. And I think we saw it in full force throughout the COVID era, but we've certainly seen it before then, and we've continued to see it since then. I do want to take a moment, though, and drill down into the COVID era, because it's easy to say we want to just shove it in a box and put it away and not revisit it. But we saw from governments over the last few years tremendously dangerous and devastating policies championed in the name of flattening the curve, trusting the science, saving grandma, all of these cliches that became commonplace during the pandemic. And lockdowns have had incredible harms on society. They've had harms on health. They've had harms on education. They've certainly had harms on mental health and well-being and social cohesion. And there has never been a real accounting of exactly how bad that's been. Well, a new documentary hopes to change that. Take a look.
The public did not know that there were prominent scientists that disagreed with the lockdown policies. They wanted to create an illusion of consensus.
And this was shocking to me in a free society to simply decree the lockdowns.
The federal government was working with social media companies, censoring dissenting opinions.
If the government is engaging in unconstitutional acts of censorship, who has the power to stop it?
It's just the most damning discovery.
Suddenly, just boom, you're fired and no explanation.
It was more than just silencing me, it was shutting me up.
That is the trailer for COVID Collateral, part of the trailer anyway, as a new film that looks at, in a lot of ways, the dishonesty and the misinformation that was coming not from the corners of the internet, but much of it from the official sources we were told to give our complete and full trust to. Now, as we learned in the last couple of years, much of that narrative has been shattered, but even so, there is a section of this whole discussion, a section of this whole debate that has never really had a full accounting. Now, that's one of the things that's put under the microscope in this new documentary. COVID Collateral comes out this month, starts actually with a premiere in Toronto, and also has as its filmmaker and producer, an Emmy-nominated producer, the writer and director, Vanessa Dylyn, who joins me now. Vanessa, thank you so much for coming on today. Good to speak with you, and congratulations on the film.
Thank you so much, Andrew.
So let me first ask the why, because every time this topic comes up, we're faced with the fact that in some ways, the things that happened over the course of the pandemic were incredibly disruptive, I think incredibly dangerous from a civil liberties perspective, from a truth and trust perspective. But there's also a part of society that I think wants to move on from these questions, that wants to kind of just shut the door, put it in a closet, and not revisit it. But you're opening that wide open here.
Yes, and the reason I'm opening it wide open is not to take a side. I didn't want this film to be, oh, she's not on the side of lockdowns. I wanted this to be more of an exploration of what happened to us, and the fact that I believe many members of the public still don't know that there were highly credentialed scientists who were against lockdowns, and these scientists were censored right from early 2020. For example, Jay Bhattacharya of Stanford, Scott Atlas from the Hoover Institute, Sunetra Gupta at Oxford, and Martin Kulldorff at Harvard, all didn't feel that there was a scientific basis, or enough of a scientific basis to lock down. That we in the Western world already had a pandemic plan in place since 2006, and so what I wanted to explore, because I felt as I listened to these scientists early in 2020. And then I also noticed there was another group of scientists who really suspected that the coronavirus came from a lab, They did not buy the natural evolution theory that it came from a wet market. So I wanted to look at the film more from the perspective of what happens when science is censored in a free society. And what I do trace in the film is that these dissenting voices were not only censored by their own institutions, they were censored by the mainstream media, they were censored by big tech. Even the Biden government got involved and dictated to Twitter. They ordered Twitter, Facebook. They said, you've got to take these guys down, or you've got to minimize their voices. And so the bigger thesis in the film is what happens when science is censored.
It's a fascinating question, because one of the things that was so, I mean, it's now become a meme and a joke of sorts, that whole trust the science line. We were being told, trust the scientists. We had an endless stream of people with white coats and doctorates and letters after their name for miles and miles coming out and telling us these things. And what was amazing is that it very quickly became trust our science, trust our scientists. And anyone who came up, I mean, that list of people you mentioned, the Martin Kulldorff, the Jay Bhattacharya, these are people who would have been in December of 2019 seen as just world-renowned, uncontroversial, mainstream experts, the kind that you could put on CNN, you could put on stage, you could put on BBC, you could put at any academic institution. Again, Stanford. This isn't some like fringe far-right school in the middle of Arkansas. This is Stanford. And then the second that they came out with what I would call generously dissident views from the mainstream narrative, they were cast aside. They were fringe. They were science deniers. They were peddlers of misinformation. And there must have been, and I don't know if you explore it in the film, but some disbelief from these people that were part of the elite establishment scientific community up until 2 weeks before the pandemic, and then became pariahs.
Yes, and I remember Jay Bhattacharya telling us what happened to him. That not only did his own colleagues turn against him, but the institution of Stanford itself. So this was a very, very lonely battle for him. Luckily, again, he had very trusted colleagues such as Sunetra Gupta and Scott Atlas and Martin Kulldorff, who together they formed the Great Barrington Declaration, which was a big science. It was a big science-based declaration that in essence said that lockdowns, it said that the most vulnerable people should be protected, but that most able-bodied people were not at great danger of getting COVID, and that the collateral damage, the societal cost, the bankruptcies, the mental illness, the suicide ideations. They said all of this collateral damage had not been calculated. It was not part of the risk-benefit ratio of lockdowns. I remember in Scott Atlas's book. Now, Scott Atlas was appointed by President Trump to be a special advisor to the coronavirus task force. And what he mentions in his book, as I recall, was that when he met with Dr. Fauci and the coronavirus group, that amongst them there were not other people from other disciplines that you would need, such as the social scientists, the the economists and other people that could have formed a more a much bigger task force and a more balanced picture of what will happen if we lock down. So those are the people on the team who were not there. So it became like that epidemiologist point of view that we must save lives at any cost. Well, we don't run our society that way. That's why we don't ban cars. There's no so anyway, what the Great Barrington Declaration did follow was primarily that our pandemic plan that had been in place since 2006.
I wanted to ask about your own background in doing this, because you've also, like some of these doctors and experts we were just talking about, have had a very mainstream career. You've been in, I think, very established circles, and you've certainly been recognized for that work with an Emmy nomination. And you're also sticking your neck out a fair bit by getting involved in this. And I'm curious if you found just, documentaries are, they can be made with small crews, and I know you've got a small team here, but did you find when you were talking to your colleagues that there were people that just wanted nothing to do with you or this, that maybe because they disagreed with it, or maybe they agreed but were scared of just being associated with it?
Andrew, I found tremendous hostility within my own documentary group, within broadcasters. Most of the broadcasters who knew my work when I pitched them this concept were quite polite and just didn't answer. or there was a very polite, "Oh, not for us this time." Now, like most documentary filmmakers, I don't score a hit every time I pitch a concept.
You've dealt with the rejection, but when it's
Exactly.
different than the normal rejection you're used to getting on a
This
project.
this was hostile, and people in my own industry were hostile. So outside of my core creative team, who were very well informed on this issue and could see that it was going to be a good journalistic film, that it was going to be right down the center, and that it was going to appeal to the left of center people and the reasonable right of center people. Outside of them, I could not even get business affairs people to work on this film, because as soon as they saw that the broadcaster was New Tang Dynasty, or as soon as they read the concept, they were just terrified and said, "Not for me." I suppose I shouldn't have been stunned, but it still shakes you when even a closed captioning technician says, "No, I don't want this job." That's how deep it went.
Even typing out the words that are being said would just be a bridge too far for them.
Oh, that's exactly it. So
Wow.
I made this film. I mean, I stuck my neck out, and I've had a brutal, and I'm soft pedaling this. I've had a brutal 2 years trying to get this made, trying to get this financed. And it must be the most cursed project I've ever taken on. But I think it is a film that will open dialogue, and that will appeal to reasonable people, and it will tell us something about what we have all lived through. The other thing in the film that I think is that I deal with, and I think that's very important, is that we as a society bore the burden of this pandemic in a very disproportionate way. Meaning, many of us of the laptop class, government workers, were paid to stay home. Whether you were productive or not, you were paid. And a lot of these people had children that they were able to supervise outside of school, or they were able to send the kids to the cottage. But there was another class of people that actually had to show up somewhere to get paid. And if we look at the pre-vaccine period, These were the truck drivers that drove trucks across borders so that we could eat. These were the people in the grocery stores who stocked shelves. These were the people who worked in warehouses, such as Amazon, so that we could order. And people who worked in kitchens so that we could have takeout. So I think the film, I think, does explore this kind of disproportionate burden on the part of certain people.
Well, and I would just point out the film industry itself, people in that industry should be well aware of this because they were shut down and went back to zero. And I recall, I know it was different across the world. In Ontario, they ended up giving a special carve out for the film industry. And I remember there was one particular moment where they were filming a show for Netflix, I think it was, at a church in Hamilton. And it was illegal for them to have church at the church in Hamilton, but they could film a fake church service at the church in Hamilton because the film industry have been given their carve out. And what I found so devastating is that a lot of people in that industry, any criticism of lockdowns they had disappeared once they were given that exemption. And everyone else in society, like you mentioned, the truckers, the restaurant workers, the spa workers, all of them were still dealing with the consequences of it.
Exactly. Yeah.
So let me just ask you then about your distribution. I have a couple that I'm friends with from the U.S. that do documentaries, Anne McElhenney and Phelan McAleer, and they've done some contentious subjects before and find they just have so much resistance. They can't get movie theaters that are going to play it. They can't get it on the streaming services. And I'm assuming from you nodding that you're dealing with some of these same challenges right now as you're gearing up for release.
I think the U.S. will be a much easier place for me to deal with. Simply because I think we're going to get some fantastic special screenings in Washington and in other capitals. And I think that's the case because, as you know, Andrew, the U.S. has a much more robust media, and it has a much more robust balance in their media. They have a very healthy left of center and a very healthy right of center media. Here in Canada, we're primarily dealing with left and far left, outside of media outlets such as yours.
Well, and just to jump in, did you not have a theater that would not show this in, was it Alberta?
It was Alberta, and it was because, and I don't blame the theater owner. This was the owner of a multiplex in Alberta, and when my theater rep contacted her, she said, sight unseen. She didn't even have to see the film. It was because it was on the subject of COVID. She said, we can't show this. And she said it was because I think it was some weeks before they had hosted or rented their space to the United Conservative Party of Alberta. And apparently this was like inviting Satan into your living room. So I thought, this confused me because I thought, well, Danielle Smith's party is the ruling party of Alberta.
Yeah, whether you like them or not, they're the elected government. They're clearly not, they're clearly mainstream in that sense.
They are mainstream in that sense. But she said she said her past advertisers threatened to pull their advertising. She got a lot of haters, and she said it wasn't just attacks on her, but it was attacks on her staff. So she said, sorry, we can't show this. But, I'm confident that there are a lot of other outlets across Canada that will screen this film. What I'm hoping is that we get New Tang Dynasty is going to be streaming the film shortly after our premiere at the Isabel Bader Theatre in Toronto next week. After that, it will be for a time being, it will be available on my website until we get more until we get significant distribution of the film.
All right. Well, that website is covidcollateral.com. The producer and writer, Vanessa Dylyn, joins us now. Congratulations again, Vanessa, and thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Look, as I've said, there are a lot of people who I understand want to just close the box on this, but I'm a big believer in the importance of precedent and posterity, and we cannot allow so much of what passed for government policy and what passed for the way that institutions were behaving and governing themselves. We cannot allow that to become the norm and allow that to become the template for the future. So very grateful that we had a film take on this done by a very reputable broadcaster, and again, a very mainstream position. So one thing that I've understood in the last little while is that a lot of people don't like things that show both sides. And the left and right are both, I don't want to say equally guilty of this, but there is guilt on both sides. And I remember, for example, when my colleague Rachel Emmanuel produced a documentary with her brother called The Freedom Occupation. I know people couldn't get over the name because they didn't like the idea that the Freedom Convoy was being called an occupation. And I don't believe it is an occupation, but I believe they were making a film and they can call it whatever the heck they want. But there were people that didn't like that it had both perspectives in it. It had critics and it had supporters, and people didn't like that. And I think we need to, as a society, get back on board with this idea of being willing to hear different perspectives, not being afraid of entertaining these different groups and these different views and all of that. Because if we do that, we're just completely segregating ourselves off into these parallel societies. And then we find ourselves so shocked to learn there are other positions because we built this little cocoon around us that doesn't have them. Absolutely. Befriend people that you disagree with. Maybe you'll have it out and maybe you'll become even closer friends because you don't care about the differences. But anyway, thank you for coming to my TED Talk. I wanted to shift to, speaking of posterity, a discussion that takes an anniversary, not a particularly pleasant anniversary, but one that is relevant to me and I know a lot of those of you tuning in. And that is the 4-year anniversary of the federal government's order in council prohibiting at first about 1,500 different types of firearms. Now, this was the infamous order in council that was supposed to take military-style assault weapons off the streets of Canada. Guns that Justin Trudeau and Bill Blair told us had one reason and one reason alone, and that is to kill as many people as possible. That was what they said about these guns. Now, for things that were just absolutely horrendous and these murder machines that the government said, you'd think that would be a real high priority to take them off the street. Well, in fact, in the last 4 years, they have not taken a single one of these guns off the street. They've been slow and not been able to get this so-called gun buyback into place. I don't mind that they haven't, but it undermines the core premise of this. It undermines the core premise of what the government said this was about, which was a public safety policy rather than a gun grab. Well, let's talk about what the last 4 years have looked like and what the next little bit may look like. Joining me is Rod Giltaca, who is, of course, our good friend and the CEO and executive director of the Canadian Coalition for Firearm Rights, which generously sponsored the documentary I did about this back in 2021. Called Assaulted, Justin Trudeau's War on Gun Owners. Rod, good to talk to you. Thanks for coming on today.
Thank you, Andrew.
So, look, a little bit bittersweet, as I sort of indicated there. On one hand, 4 years, and they haven't managed to get a single one of these guns. So for gun owners who bought these things legally, there's still a bit of hope. But it also undermines just how, I think, really dangerous this government's agenda is, that they can just, with a stroke of a pen, no real accountability, prohibit firearms that are legally owned that are not causing any damage, as evidenced by the fact that they've still been out in Canada for the last 4 years.
Yeah, it's a mess. It was an opportunity. It was a political opportunity for the Liberals. They jumped on it, and now they have this legacy of failure and broken promises and bad ideas that have stretched now 4 years, and it's going to continue to grow. The longer they wait to fulfill their obligations that they made 4 years ago, the worse it's going to be politically, and the worse it is for all the people, licensed gun owners, that haven't done anything to deserve to be involved in any of this.
You and I spoke when I was doing that documentary back in 2021, and I quote that and share clips from that documentary from time to time, because every problem that was addressed in that is still a problem. Usually they've gotten worse. Nothing has gotten better. Everything has at least maintained or gotten worse. And, you know, from the business perspective, that's one of the most devastating effects here, is that inventory that was promised by the government to be compensated, fair market value, has been just sitting like a brick in a warehouse. And even with the government trying to work with one of the industry groups, the CSAAA, nothing's come about there. And I'm wondering what you'd say has happened to the morale of the firearms community in the last couple of years. Are people throwing in the towel? Are people getting ready to fight it politically? What's the sense been?
Well, it's incredibly discouraging for a lot of people. I mean, remember, we're talking about people that hadn't done a single thing to deserve any of this. They haven't done a single thing. But of course, they're caught right in the middle of the Liberals, again, political opportunism. For businesses, it's probably devastating. I don't have a firearm business myself, but I can imagine that some of these businesses have been sitting on tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of inventory for 4 years. And a lot of businesses operate on a line of credit. So they're paying interest, they're paying insurance, they have space, that's money they can't use to buy other inventory. 4 years. And I think the most important point is the retail aspect of this. The government should be able to go to retailers, say, give us your invoices and we'll pay you for them and we'll come and get the guns. And the fact that they couldn't achieve that, because that's the easiest part of this whole buyback idea, they couldn't even achieve that. And individual Canadians have paid the price for it. And I know several businesses personally that have gone under because of all this inventory they're sitting on. They've had to finance the whole time. So it's just a mess. And Canada's gotten more dangerous the entire time too. So I don't know what's going on.
What's your read on the alternative? Because I know that Aaron O'Toole, prior to the election in 2021, was fairly supportive of firearms owners and firearms rights, but there were some points of equivocation. And of course, during the election campaign, he infamously just flipped on his position, which was that he was going to reverse the OIC. With Pierre Poilievre, I've heard a much stronger position on this. And I'm curious if you're fairly confident that if there is a change of government, that a lot of the really damaging policies will be gone.
Well, in politics, you don't know 100% anything, right? There's just anyone can change course at any time. But we've really stood behind the Conservatives. They are the party that has a chance to win and that has promised that they'll put the focus on crime and violence, not licensed gun owners. To be honest with you, if the Conservatives started backpedaling on that, then they're no friend to law-abiding Canadians either. And then I think as a Canadian, I would really lose faith in the entire system. I'm trying desperately to believe that there's a political solution and that there's some fairness and justice and just genuine straight dealings in politics at some level. But I'll tell you, it's every year that passes and we see the behaviors of the people that make up the government in Canada, it just keeps getting further and further away from something that's attainable. I don't know.
Yeah, and you and I have spoken in the past about the legal avenue, and I know CCFR is availing itself of the court system as it has a right to, but it's very expensive. There's no guarantee of this court siding in the sense of freedom, as you've learned at the lower court, the federal court. And, then the one sort of bit of hope you have left is that just as it was a stroke of the pen that brought this in, a stroke of a pen could bring it out. You just need the right person to hold the pen.
That's true. But I was very disappointed in our experience with the judicial system. You have a court that says that banning plastic straws and plastic shopping bags is unreasonable. It's beyond the pale, unconstitutional even, and that the government is it's a gross overreach. Yet, the same court, not the same judge, but the same court says, oh yeah, you can just stroke of a pen take property, and such important property as firearms, that people are individually licensed and receive a criminal background check every day for as long as they hold that license just to be able to possess. Something that we've had since before Canada, became a country. And that's okay. You can just take those things, make them illegal, make you keep them, don't pay you anything for them, and slander these people left and right for 8 years straight. I mean, apparently that's okay. So I think the judicial system is completely upside down. Our political system we're having a real collapse of confidence. And, it's funny. It's the gun lobby guy is the one that's trying to hold, Canada together, at least in my own mind, and not lose faith in the entire system. There's got to be a solution where we can preserve the system.
Yeah, and the thing too is that we are seeing across the country, and I've talked about it on the show this week in particular, this rise in crime. Crime is becoming the new normal across the country. Property crime, even violent crime. Criminals are in a revolving door system, and law-abiding gun owners are sitting there just looking at their safe that's been locked and dust is over it because they haven't been able to get out what's in there anyway, and seeing that the people who are causing all the problems are the ones that the government is not really interested in going after. And I think on firearms crime as well. Like, look, most people in this country do not own, or I would even say need, a firearm for self-defense, but it is a tool available to people, and it's a legal tool available to people. And right now, with Canada going the direction it's going, it's quite something that this is where the government is directing its priorities.
Yeah, it's awful. It's awful, and it's a government, and I don't think it's. I'm not trying to just hack on the Liberals because I don't agree with them, but on so many levels, the government's just completely out of control. They've. I mean, I don't want to veer off of our topic of firearms, right? But they've damaged Canada in so many different ways, and the level of propagandizing and dare I say gaslighting that's going on in the political community these days, it's very, very discouraging. You can't believe anything anyone's saying, and I don't know. I think there's a lot going on, and I think guns is a really great example because despite everything that the Liberals have said, and despite everything that they've done, and the handgun ban, and the long gun ban, and Bill C-21, and everything that they've done, Canada has become more violent. We've seen more firearm-related violence. So I think even just any layman can sit back, whether or not they know this topic, and say, whatever you're doing isn't working. It's not working. So stop doing what you're doing and do something different. And for us, it's focus on crime, violence, including firearm-related violence and gun smuggling. That's what you need to do if you want to get rid of this violence. But I don't know. It's just a strange time in Canadian history.
Rod Giltaca for Attorney General. You heard it here first. Not that you would do that to yourself, but we would be in a better place. Rod from the CCFR, always good to talk to you. Thanks for coming on today. And I won't say a happy anniversary, but certainly an important anniversary.
Well, thank you, Andrew.
All right. Thank you, Rod. And that does it for us, not just for today, not just for the week. I am off next week. I am off on a personal vacation, so I have no good updates for you. I can't tease a secret mission or anything like that, but you will be well covered by the team at True North. I think we might have some reruns and interviews for you to keep you occupied if that's really, really what you want. But I'm going to be hopefully avoiding my computer as much as possible. But I will see you upon my return. What is it, May? Let me look at it. I think it's like May 12th or something. May 13th is the Monday. So I will see you then. But in the meantime, thank you, God bless, and good day to you all.
Thanks for listening to The Andrew Lawton Show. Support the program by donating to True North at www.tnc.news.